The NDP leader met with the Prime Minister late Friday for 40 minutes and handed over the NDP's bottom line demands for support of the government's budget. Support, as everyone knows, which could save the government from defeat. Jack Layton joins us from Toronto in his first public response since that meeting. So are we going to have an election, Mr. Layton? Did the Prime Minister seem ready to buy your demands and save his government?
Well, he's got a choice to make. He can either come up with a good budget that responds to some of the real needs that Canadians are facing today, which we outlined, or he can decide not to do that, in which case he'll be deciding to move us into an election. People that I'm talking to from coast to coast to coast are really still struggling with this recession, particularly seniors who can't make ends meet. They can't make it to the end of the month without worrying about covering their rent, or some of them having to turn off their heat or go down to a food bank for food. That's just not right, and we've got to deal with this retirement economic security issue. We also feel that the costs of home heating are ballooning, and the federal government has a responsibility here to take that federal tax off of home heating. The HST is certainly very unpopular where it's been brought in. And bring back that home retrofit program so people can fix up their homes and reduce energy bills, as well as creating jobs and do the right thing for the environment. Lastly, we of course talked about the need that people have for family doctors. There's still 4 million Canadians who don't have one, and our healthcare system is in desperate need of improvement, particularly to get family medicine on the go. And of course, we also talked about the corporate tax cut direction he's going, which is fundamentally wrong.
Well, wait a minute now. When we talked to your offices in the last while, when they listed your bottom line demands, corporate tax cuts weren't there. And I know already the Liberals over the weekend are complaining that you've caved in on corporate tax cuts. You're telling me you did discuss that with him?
For about a third of the meeting was focused specifically on corporate tax cuts, and our position has been very, very clear on that. In fact, the Prime Minister even acknowledged, he said, you folks have been consistent. He was puzzled by the Liberals because, of course, they have been supporting those corporate tax cuts for a long time, going right back to 2005, when our party convinced Paul Martin's government to cancel the corporate tax cuts. They didn't want to do it, and we said, put the money into the things that people need today. And it was education, and it was the environment with public transit, and it was affordable housing, including for Aboriginal Canadians. And then, of course, in 2007, when these corporate tax cuts were brought in by the Conservatives, the Liberals supported them, or they made sure their people weren't there. We moved an amendment, Craig, at that time, to put a stop to those corporate tax cuts, and the Liberals voted against our amendment.
So this isn't something you... I'm surprised that so many of us had heard that corporate tax cuts weren't on your list. And you know that's a non-starter for the Prime Minister. I mean, that's end of conversation. He is not giving up on anything to do with corporate tax cuts. You know that, so why don't you just say it doesn't look like this is going anywhere?
Well, because we're going to look at the whole budget altogether, but he knows very well that our position on corporate tax cuts is clear. In fact, he said so right in the meeting.
We also hear from people around the Prime Minister that your list is way too costly, way too high a price tag on it, and they are fighting to control burgeoning deficit.
Well, they're just not telling the truth there. You can't trust the Prime Minister and his people on this sort of thing. In fact, our proposals are very reasonable, they're modest, they're practical, and they're doable. Whether it comes to making sure that there's an improvement to the GIS so that people can afford, seniors can afford food at the end of the month. It's not actually very expensive to do this, it's just simply the right thing to do. To take the Canada Pension Plan and move towards doubling it over the medium term, as many, many experts have suggested, so that all seniors can have retirement security. That's affordable and doable. And a way of phasing it in has been proposed that the Prime Minister should embrace. At one point, it looked like his government was going to do it, but the banks and the insurance company lobbyists, the same private sector operators that made the kind of mistakes, fundamental mistakes, that took us into the recession. They managed to convince Stephen Harper to back off of the Canada Pension Plan. We want that moving forward again. When it comes to the home heating and those other issues, these are all very affordable proposals, Craig. They make sense, they're practical, and they're doable.
Put a price on them. The government seems to be suggesting we're talking $4 or $5 billion at least. You put a price on them for me.
If you look, first of all, if you look at the home heating situation, it's about a $900 million proposition we're putting forward. That includes renovating homes across the country to reduce energy bills and taking that federal tax off home heating. You know, that's an essential. I told the Prime Minister, heating your homes is an essential thing in Canada, and you're taxing it. That's wrong.
That's $1 billion. That's just one of your proposals, and there's $1 billion.
Well, look, Craig, they're looking at spending billions all over the place, whether it's on the corporate tax cuts or whether it's on jets that they want to buy, you name it. It's not as though this government is averse to spending money. We're talking about a modest expenditure out of the total package, and it looks as though government revenues are going to be somewhat improved in the budget coming forward. And we think that Canadians who have suffered through this recession and need a little bit of help, think about the retirees and the seniors, many of them women, who simply can't get by at the end of the month. We think it's their turn now.
Is it wise, Mr. Layton, for you politically to be going to the Conservatives and offering a deal to save them from defeat on their budget when you know very well that there is no group of Canadians as fiercely opposed to everything the Prime Minister and his party represent than your NDP constituents?
Well, we, of course, take a very practical view of this. We're trying to get the right thing done and do what we said we would do when so many Canadians voted for us the last time around. And I'll give you an example. When we forced the Conservatives to consider extending unemployment insurance during the height of the recession, when jobs were really at a premium and people were not able to find work through the winter, we got a lot of support. Mr. Ignatieff has said, your time's up, Mr. Harper. And we said, wait a minute, $1 billion for tens of thousands of families who are unemployed to help them get through the winter. If the Conservatives would agree to our proposal there, then we would keep the government going in order to get that done. And we got a lot of support across the country for that, because I think that that's what people expect parties to do. They expect parties to actually work together on their behalf. And that's what New Democrats are trying to do each and every day in the House of Commons.
Finally,